Yeah, all right. I think it's time to start. I didn't know it was almost 9:30. I think you guys can see it. I don't think you need to be any closer. Thank you, sir. All right. Welcome to Alto. So this is IETF 102, and this is the Alto working group. So I suspect you're all okay. Hey, Simon. I'll just take 1 second and talk with Simon. Hey, I had a last minute request. Okay, and just press this. That's it. This is the last two presentations. Yeah, same presentation. Thanks. Okay. All right. So this is the note well statement, which I suspect all of you are intimately familiar with. Anything we do, talk, say, or write here is part of the IETF. So without further ado, this is our agenda. I have rearranged it a little bit based on last minute requests where some folks could not travel due to visa problems, and also to give it a better flow. Chow, if you're listening, I see you on Meet Echo. So I put your two presentations towards the end. So you should be able to do a remote presentation once we get to yours, and I'll unmute the Meet Echo from here. So we have a note taker. Richard is taking notes. Thanks, Richard. I do need one more note taker. Could somebody volunteer? Lyle. Lyle is the second note taker, so thank you very much. And I think Meet Echo also has the Jabber feed, so I will keep an eye on the Jabber feed in Meet Echo, and if somebody posts anything, I'll go ahead and proxy for them. So this is the agenda for today. As usual, we are trying to give precedence to the chartered work items, and of interest to us should be the remaining issues in Alto and the Alto survey and next steps. As you can see, both Jan and I have been trying to close some of these working group agenda items and move them forward. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the intent is to try to finish. We have about 7 drafts that are we need to wrap up. So the intent is to try to move these 7 drafts ahead and then figure out what to do with the working group itself. I've been chairing the working group since its inception, I think in 2008, so that's been 10 years. And you know, we can recharter or we can close the working group after the current deliverables are met. That's a decision that we will have as a working group. And some of that aspects we can discuss later on today. If we do recharter, I think it's important for other blood to take over, new blood. So I would be very happy to have other chairs, and we will work with the new chairs if a decision has been made to recharter and do the transition, both Jan and I. Jan is also going to retire if we do recharter, so it'll be nice to have you know, fresh new blood come in and drive this process forward. But Jan and I are committed to finishing up the pending work and getting the current crop of internet drafts out as RFCs. So we'll talk more about that later on. And then we have a series of independent submissions, flow-based query, multiple Alto resource queries, and a few others. So that's the agenda for today. Anybody wants to change it, or anybody has any input? Same question. I don't see the chat. Can you see? Yeah. There's no chat. There's no chat. So I don't have Pigeon. I didn't have time to install Pigeon, so I can join remotely. Yeah, you can join remotely and you can get the chat. Cool, thanks. All right. So if there's no changes in the agenda, let's continue. So we've been busy since IETF 101. There have been movement in a few drafts. Performance metrics has been through TSVR early review. Right now in this IETF, there is no discussion for it, but I would like the authors to inform the working group what the outcome was from the TSVR review. Probably it'll be great if you could put it on the mailing list on what you're doing to address the TSVR review. Cost calendar is in publication requested stage. I went through the write-up and I'm shepherding it, and it is right now out of the working group with with ISG. XDOM discovery is currently being prepared. The IPR statements are in from all of the authors. Jan has prepared the proto write-up, and there is a new revision that we are waiting for. As soon as the revision becomes available, we will go ahead and move that draft out to publication requested as well. Increment update SSE has been working group last called. From what I recall, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, there was nothing substantive with the contents of the draft itself during working group last call review. There was some editorial comments and some nit comments, which I suspect the authors are going to address and put a new draft forward. As soon as a new draft becomes available, subject to vacation schedules between me and Jan, we'll put the proto write-up out and also move this to publication requested. So that leaves us with the following 4 remaining drafts. CDNI request routing, Sean is going to be talking about it today. So we will see what the status of that is and how to move that ahead. Path vector, Richard and Dawn will fill us in on what the status of that is and how do we go ahead with that. I'll jump to unified props, which is also going to be discussed today between Sabine and I believe Richard. So we'll find out the status of that as well. Performance metrics, as I said, is not due to be discussed today, but it'll be nice to have the authors post something on the mailing list giving us an idea of what was the outcome of TSVR review. And Jan and I will then figure out what to do with respect to working group last call, or if there is any open issues. I think that is it from my side. Any questions before we go into the first presentation?
So Richard Young, so I do want to update because I did talk to the other co-author of Performetrics, and he said we definitely will make sure we update and post on the mailings by probably in the next couple weeks. Okay, excellent. All right, so that looks like that's on a measure to move ahead as well. So I think right now, after this working group ends, over the next period until Bangkok, we'll be trying to get these 4 drafts out in a stable state as much as possible. The one after, so one administrative note right now, at least neither Jan or I are planning to be in Bangkok. So there is not going to be a face-to-face meeting. We may have a virtual meeting, or if there is enough mass in the work being done in these 4 drafts and people feel that we need to have a face-to-face meeting at Bangkok, then we could always have a temporary chair and try to accommodate a face-to-face meeting. But beyond that, we will definitely have a virtual meeting to move this work ahead between now and Bangkok. All right. So that said, I think, Sean, you're up first.
I have this for you, so you can advance the slides. And it also has a pointer.
Hello? Yeah. Okay, let me start. I'm Sean Lin, and today I will present the CDNI draft. Okay, so today's my presentation will include two parts. One is the summary of changes, and the other is some discussions. So in this change, the goal of us is to make our document more clean and simple, based on the working group members' comments. So we have 5 relatively big changes and 6 relatively small changes. The first one is we shorten the introduction part, and we also add an outline of this document. And the second one is we use some pointers and example to support the benefits of using Alto. And the third one is based on the discussions in IETF 101, we updated the CDNI FCI map response schema. And the first one is we're trying to add more description based on the Alto network map footprint type. And we described the dependencies between FCI maps and network maps. And also, we added the arrow handling for filter CDNI FCI maps. And for some consistency consideration, we also update 2 media type, and we also update 1 data components name. And also, we extend the security consideration and make some description of the example more clean. At last, we also have some small text edit. So can I a little bit upward? Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So the first part is the revision of our introduction. First, we changed not that important list into the plain text, and we also remove unnecessary descriptions. And also, we add the outline of the whole document in this section. And for the support of benefits of Alto, for benefit 1, we add how Alto can help your CDN to select a property CDN. And for the second benefit, we add pointer to the section 4 of the CDN FCI map using Alto network map. And we also emphasize the identification between the UCDN and DCDN, and also add pointer to the security consideration. And for the RESTful design, we add a pointer or reference to the section 3. And for arrow handling, we add a pointer to section 5. And for filtered map service, we use the example of the unified property map to show that we can directly use the filter map service of Alto. And for the benefit 6, we have some small edit on the SSE part, and for the benefit 8, we also we add a new property for entities in section 6, which is the CDNI capabilities. And for the benefit 9, we also add a reference to the path vector extensions. So the next update is we update the CDNI FCI map response schema based on the discussion. In IETF 101, we use the base advertisement object defined in RFC 8008 to encode the CDNI FCI map. And we also keep the original encoding of the base advertisement object because we want to remain them for self-contained purpose. And also, we use an example. This example is, there are 2 examples, but they describe the same capability object with the same footprint constraint. We want to use these examples to show that the optimization of the base advertisement object is possible. However, for the basic CDNI interconnection, the specific of such mechanisms are out of the scope of this document. And the next one is we update the footprint types description of Alto network map. First, we indicate that the corresponding footprint value is a list of the PID names, and these PID names are actually the reference of the PIDs in a network map. So the CDNI FCI map depends on network map. So the dependent VTAG field with a reference to the related network map must be included in the CDNI FCI maps. The next one is about the error handling of the filter CDNI FCI maps. We first emphasize that the response must indicate an error using Alto protocol error handling. And for invalid request, we point out 3 cases. The first one is the value of capability type is null. And the second one is the value of capability value is null. And the third one is the capability value is an inconsistency with capability type. So when this situation happens, the request is invalid and the Alto server must return an invalid field value to indicate its errors. And the next one is for consistency consideration, we update the data components name of CDNI FCI map to CDNI FCI map. And also we update the media type of the query unfiltered CDNI FCI map to application Alto CDNI FCI map JSON, and also list filter service. And for the extension of the security consideration, despite of the 5 security consideration already described in RFC 7285, I think we must strengthen that the isolation of the CDNI FCI maps for different UCDN is important, because otherwise it may lead the UCDN to redirect requests to a wrong DCDN, which cannot serve this request. And a potential solution is that we cannot include all CDNI FCI maps in only one IRD. So the next one is we have some revision of the examples. Basically, we add more explanation for incremental update in section 3.7.3, and also we have more description on how to filter on capabilities in section 5.7.2. And next part is about the discussion. And we are thinking about what other Alto features may benefit to CDNI. For example, calendar or path vector. Can they help in the CDNI situations? And the next one is, since CDNI has 4 interfaces, if FCI use Alto, can other interface also use Alto as well? Or at least how all 4 together they can fit together? So next one is the next steps. I think we want to get more comments from the working group members, and I want to know what other opinions or suggestions from you all. Thanks.
Yeah, Richard, go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to relay one comment sent by Yunfei Zhang and from Tencent, and his comment, unfortunately his slide was delayed, so therefore he couldn't really land here. That's why I'm relaying his comments. And his main comment was there's a generic paradigm called capabilities and with entities. For example, he really mentioned in the context of 5G, and you have all the capabilities, you have, and then you have the, basically you have devices or endpoints would have capabilities. And his comment would be CDNI somehow, if you look in that bigger picture, wouldn't look like essentially is different encoding of capabilities, and for each capability, which footprints would have that capabilities. So his comment, of course, he's not, I don't believe he's objecting to proceed. He's asking is, can you clarify, can CDNI essentially serve as a template or general design for general network capabilities exposure, which is reverse? Because typically when we design, we always see from entities to properties. And here's encoding is from capabilities to footprints to entities. So I don't know how you want to answer, reply or react to his comment. He's not here, so you can answer, I guess.
Yeah, so from my current understanding, the CDNI can have such abilities, I think.
Oh, sorry, can you just show one example, probably make it easier. Can you just show one example of your CDNI query? Yeah, yep. That might be good. Yeah, so basically is encoding is capabilities.
Yeah.
And your capability type, for example, now FCI delivery protocol.
Yeah.
And value, what kind of this capability you have, for example, here HTTP 1.1.
Yeah.
And then you talk about entities, which one would have these capabilities?
Yes.
His comment would be, okay,
Reverse.
and what if you don't have FCI.deliver protocol? What if you have, for example, 5G and this is whatever capability, they support this kind of values, then footprint. Is it possible to really do that design? If that's possible design, then why do you name a CDNI FCI map? Couldn't should be generic for example, capability map? I think that's the question.
So I think we definitely can register more new capability types. So I think this response can be handled also by CDNI FCI maps. And if they want to query based on footprint, they could also use the unified property map to do so.
Okay, so I think we are 2 minutes over, so I will ask you to keep your comments brief, and probably when Yunpei is here, maybe you can talk with him and try to see how to solve. It looks more of a semantic issue more than anything that's substantive, so I think you can sort it out with him.
Okay, thank you.
Jensen?
Just a quick comment. Why we need a new service to provide the CDNI FCI? For example, can consider whether we can just use the unified property or just use the unified property to provide this.
Just use unified property.
But not use this.
You could query based on the footprint, but you cannot query on the capabilities. Sometimes a client may ask, for example, we want to know what's the footprint of these capabilities. If you only use the unified property map, you cannot get this response easily.
Yeah, maybe. So just like the comment from Richard, maybe we need to extend we need to have a general query schema to provide the more general.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
Lyle Burtz. Question actually for the chair. So if we take this submission and genericize it, right, at that point, understanding that we would have very strong examples supporting CDNI FCI, is that a new submission, or what would happen here? Because clearly going to the ISG, with naming and everything else, very targeted, right? And then kind of abstracting it up, right? What's the best way to go forward if that's genericized?
So I think this work had its genesis in another working group that closed down, and it came here, and it's always been associated strongly with CDNI footprints, capabilities, and stuff. If you want to make it more general, I think so long as the primary use case still ends up being CDNI FCI, I think we should be okay. But we could always have that talk with Miria as it moves forward. But I think we need to move this draft forward because it's been around for a while. So Richard, quick comment. And
very quick comment. So I think what probably address we really need to check with him, which will be here. And of course, I think that's also one of the comment. It's probably his objection to naming CDNI-FCI map, probably can make a generic capability map. That's probably the simpler change. Then which make everyone happy.
Right.
Maybe that's the only change. But I'm just.
Okay.
Okay, so Sean, follow up with him, please, and let us know then what you guys decide.
Okay.
Okay? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So next up, I believe, is incremental updates. Here you go.
So the incremental updates is already in the working group last call, but we still make some changes to this draft during these days. We have made several updates, and the first two are some minor issues that we fixed some mainly like typos and writing issues fixed in this draft. And then for the terms item, we add two new terms like the update stream server and stream control server. And we have three server names like update stream server, stream control server, and a generic term named auto server. So we have some text describing what differences is between them. And for the following three items, I think they are the major items that we may change. For the updates of control updated message formats, for the decoupling of the update stream service and the stream control service. And the last one is that we improve the response of these two services listed above. So we will start with the updates of control update message format. In a previous version, or maybe some previous versions, we have been used the removed field for the update stream service for the control stream service to inform the client what resources have been removed. So considering that we have a removed field, we consider to add another static field to inform the client what resources the service has already started to send notifications, send updates to the client. And we renamed the removed field to the stopped field. Another is that we added a string named description, like just to send some text describing why this update event is happening. The last major item that we made is that we made a major modular design to decouple the update stream service and stream control service. So we have three entities in the SAC design: the auto client, update stream server, and the stream control server. I think most of you are familiar with what the process is. So the auto client first send an initial request to the update stream server, and then update stream server might send data update messages and as well as control update messages back to the auto client. Another is that auto client can also send add or request later to the stream control server. So the stream control server might communicate with the update stream server with a primary communication channel, which is not considered in our draft. After dealing with these all processes, the update stream server will still send the data update messages and the control update messages to the auto client. So in previous draft versions, we have a constraint on this process is that whenever update stream is established, the update stream server will create another service that is the stream control service. That means they are combined together. So in this version, we remove this combination into that the stream control service is an optional one, but we support that design in our draft. Of course, developers can support other mechanisms to provide services like stream control service if they have a fully mature implementation. So to support such decoupling, we add a new field in the capability that is a support stream control field That means if the server shows such set the field to true, that means yes, we support the stream control service to be together with the update stream service. But if the server sets this field to false, that means they may use other mechanisms to develop the mechanisms as the stream control service. So the last one is that we update the response format of the update stream service and the stream control service. So the general processing of all the requests is that the server will first validate whether your request is valid. So if not, we will return an standard auto error message. If yes, for the update stream server, we will return the data update message and control update message. So for the stream control service, we have more complex that is if the request is valid with but with the invalid associated update stream, the server will return a 404 not found response to the client. So if all the above two is valid and the request is successfully processed by the server will return either a 202 accepted response or the 204 no content response. The differences between these two responses is that whether the update stream server is sure about that the update stream server has also processed the request successfully. I think that's all. The last one is what a standard auto error response would be like. Actually, the standard auto response format is already defined in the IFC 7285. So we just to underline some contents to be used, such as the auto response the auto error response field response would be starting from the HTTP 400 by request. And the field will include a meta field with the code, what's standard auto error code for this message, and what's field and what's the value of your error message. The last two are optional fields, but the server can provide them. So here is an example that if the request includes an invalid field, like remove the client, requested to remove the client ID that the resource with named properties, but this resource is not previously added to the update stream. So the server will regard it as an error request and will tell the client that the code is the invalid field value, and the invalid field is the remove field, and the value for the invalid value is the properties. So we have already settled for the updates. We have already finished the new version of this update stream of this incremental updates, and we'll upload it to the working group as soon as possible, maybe after this meeting.
Okay. That all? That's it? All right. So as Don said, a new version will be appearing, and as soon as the new version appears, based on the WGLC comments incorporated in it, we'll move it ahead. Any other last-minute comments on this particular draft before it goes ahead?
Okay, so I think last night when we meet with AD, we talked about footage closure, and there's one comment which actually is not sent to the whole mailing list, is sent by Ian Hickson, who is the designer of SSE. So I think we got a review from him, and he sent a reply on July 9th. And so his comment will be, the email will be, I took a quick look, it seems fine in terms of design because he's really looking at the review. And his main objection or his main comment would be, why do you use TLS? And one alternative possibility is, for example, he said, then rather decoding TLS, then decoding HTTP, then decoding UTF-8, then decoding SSE, then decoding Jensen, then decoding your vocabulary implementation would be just need to decode TLS, then your binary protocol, then in some cases UTF-8. So therefore, he's saying why you don't switch to binary encoding yourself. And our response would be this essentially is we really need one built on top of HTTP, but I think I think we should make this aware to the whole working group.
Right. I mean, the chance to go to a straight binary protocol, that particular train left the station many years ago, right? So I think while in practice, yes, we can do anything we are doing on top of HTTP with a bespoke binary protocol. The problem here is that, as you noted, we are building on top of existing work.
Right.
So yeah, I think we can attend to that comment, but I doubt there's anything for the working group to do unless I'm mistaken.
Okay. So for working group guidance, should I forward his email to the working group and you reply, or maybe not?
Was this email sent to you in private? And
Yeah, this basically we're asking the reviewer somehow only reply to me, sort of not in a public sense. So
yeah, you can
what's
just open
procedure?
up a quick thread saying this is the reason that the design decision was made, and then if enough people object in the working group, then we could always go back and do a binary protocol.
Sure.
Otherwise, we move as we are right now.
Okay.
Lyle, just another comment on that. I mean, at the very least, right, it would require us to probably go back and do some structuring of the base spec. So I would just advocate, if we're going to do something, that we'd have a comment that, the encoding may seem onerous, right? And if someone wants to pursue a binary protocol, they're more than welcome with the full understanding they're not following the spec. Or I don't think we need to add much
Right.
more than that, but just providing some sort of optional notice and acknowledging kind of the overhead. That's fine.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in all fairness, the gentleman who did the review is probably not IETF.
It's Google person, he done SSE.
Right. So I think there's enough context and enough institutional memory built in IETF on certain design decisions that they may not be privy to right away.
And I don't think it's necessary to say that it would require recharter or anything else in the spec. Just basically acknowledging the overhead.
Right.
Maybe more typical than alternate implementations, which are out of the scope of the document.
All right. Excellent. So then please go ahead and close that particular thread on the mailing list and make a new draft available, and we'll move this ahead to publication requested after a proto write-up.
Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
I will still be here for the
You will be
next one.
here
Yeah.
because you are presenting what?
Class vector, I think it's a lot. Next one.
All right.
Yes. So, start with the next draft, the working group document, path vector. We have built 3 building blocks to express path vector information. New cost type, which is already, I think it doesn't need to be changed more, and new entity domain, which will still remain stable. And we have been struggling with the how to express the combined information of cost map and the proper map along with it. And we have adopted the multi-part response to the have adopted the multi-part response format in, I think, the last version and maybe the last version. But we have already removed that part and moved that part to a new service that is the multi-part service draft. I think it looks like more dependent draft that will express how to inquiry the related information in a single request and how to return the related information in a single response. This will be represented by Jensen. And so as long as we have moved this part, so we have to we adopt a new I think it's previously discussed part that we adopt the extended cost map and the endpoint cost map service to support such capability. Some other updates is that to step along with the extended cost map and the endpoint cost maps, endpoint cost service. So we also make some updates to the examples and also to the compatibility if we support such extensions, and also the updates on the security considerations if we choose to express some information like path vector to the auto clients. So the first one will start from the extended cost map service. We remain the media type HTTP method and use this as the same as the cost map service defined in the base auto protocol, but we extend the capabilities field with two new fields. And one is the resource ID dependent property map, and another is that whether we allow a compound response in a single response format. And so, and another one is that to allow the query of properties, we add another input field named compound properties. Your clients can add some property names in this field to ask server for the specific properties. So for a compound response, we will add a new we will require the auto server to add a dependent text field and a property map field providing a property map. So an example of a separate response and request and response would be the following. The client will send a request as exactly the same as the base cost map to say what cost type it needs and what PID sets that it wants. And the format, response format of the cost map is the same as the base cost map, except for that the cost type is extended to support the path vector. So after the client receiving such information, it will send a request to the property map to ask for the specific properties of the property map, and the server of the property map service will still return the same format as the unified property map defined. So another extension is that we extended the endpoint cost service. Actually, the extension to the endpoint cost service is much similar to the cost map service. Similarly, we add this dependent property map and whether we support allowed compound response in these capabilities, and also the same field named compound properties in the accept input parameters. And the response is also extended as the same, but we provide a different example. That is, since we say that we allow a compound response, but we did not elaborate it in the previous example. So I will show it in this example. So here, it's good. So here, different from the base endpoint cost service, we did not only input the field with the cost types, with the endpoint pairs, but also with a new, I think there's something wrong. It is compound properties. That is, the client also puts what properties it wants in this request. And so as a response, the server will not only include endpoint cost map, but also include a property map. So the client did not have to query for the properties in a single, in another single request. And it can get all the information that it wants here. The next update is about compatibility. Since we have made some extensions to the base protocol, so it will introduce some compatibility issues. So, but we don't think there are, because we just extend some fields. So for the base auto clients who did not recognize these new fields, it will not introduce extra compatibility issues. And for the base auto protocol who did not add such fields to its capability, there is no other compatibility issues with the client. Another is that the new server will consider the compatibility issues with the multi-cost. So we add an extra constraint here, that is we do not, since we provide an array elements, so we do not allow constraint test on array elements in this document. So for compatibility with incremental updates, and since we have dependent issue, that is the one map will depend on another map. So for this dependency problem, we have to follow the dependency rules specified in the incremental updates. The last one is that the security considerations about this new document. And as we all know that path vector information actually exposes more network information to the from the server side to the client side. So the group will consider whether the network will receive more attacks because of the much exposure of the information. And another is availability of auto service. Since the computation of path vector information might consume a lot resources on the server side. So whether the server side could sustain the such like DDoS attacks due to the frequent requests from the a bunch of clients. This will be considered as a security consideration part. I think that's all.
Okay. I want to move up ahead since we are a little bit behind. But any questions on path vector? Path vector is one of the most important deliverables from this working group. So if you have not read it, I strongly advise that everybody at least go through it once. It has a lot of interesting ideas and paradigms built into it, especially as we move from a single node view to multiple node views. So if you haven't read it, we do need eyeballs on this draft. All right. Yeah, I am. Okay, so question from the queue, I think Xiao Jiang. Does PV has any plan to support multipath in the next version?
To support multipath?
In the next version, yes.
Actually, our consideration is that for the delivery of PV information, actually this draft, the extended services can provide such information. So for the multipath service, if the multipath service is developed much well, it can support the path vector information too. So we don't have to stress in this document that we have to support such service.
Okay. And the second question, or more of a comment, is for better privacy preserving, should it be emphasized in the document that the order of ANEs in the ANE list does not provide any semantics as path vectors in BGP?
Okay, I think that's a great question. So far, I think in JSON we only have there's not a concept called set, right? So therefore everything becomes array and so on. And so maybe we still want to maintain the semantics of arrays, but I think he's raising a very good question. And I don't think I have a strong opinion. I don't know about down or, but that's a good question actually.
Okay, so I think we probably best take it to the list because it appears to be a non-trivial question. Probably requires some reflection. So Jiang, if you can please put it on the list, then we can have a discussion. Richard, you can comment on it on the list and we can move from there. Okay, thank you much. And Sabine, you're next.
So this is the updates on the unified property draft. So this presentation will have two parts. So I will focus on the updates that are in the last version that was submitted for this IETF, and the Richard and Jensen may, I will give them the floor to on the remaining design issues. So the goal for this motivation, the motivation for these changes was mainly to address the comments on the last IETF in London. So the request was to specify a robust procedure to ensure consistency between the Alto address types registry and the Alto entity domain registry. So, and as I said, there are two technical issues that are remaining. So we have a version 05 that is planned for the next, for the next weeks. So the main updates here are about the consistency of the registries. And we have chosen a manual consistency method. And this part is detailed now in the section on IANA considerations. And we got that, we have designed this thing upon discussion with the IANA people that we had in London. So we also did some error updates, updates on error handling. And we updated terms to clarify and avoid ambiguity. So now on the manual consistency between the two registries. So we have added a new section that describes the procedure. So this section defines the two conditions at which both registries can be considered as consistent. And there is a rule that we also added a rule that if an Alto domain has the same identifier as an Alto address type, their addresses and coding must be compatible. So in a nutshell, so I, of course, invite you to read the section, but in a nutshell, this consistency procedure, so when you want to register a new Alto domain, you must do two tests. So you must check whether the corresponding entity address match some known network address type. And if it is the case, if yes, you must check whether such an address type is present in the Alto address type registry. And if yes, so your new domain identifier must be the same as the one already registered in the Alto address types. And if no, you can define a new entity domain identifier and use it to register register it with the IANA. So and okay, now if such an address type is not present in the Alto address type registry, same thing, you go ahead and define a new identifier. By the way, we noticed that, okay, this in the algorithm of the last version, we can simplify actually the algorithm. So the domain name registration process is specified in another section, in the next section of this document. So to make it simple, 3 examples. For example, you want to register entity domain IPv4, IPv6. So you check, does this match with some known address type? Yeah, this is known. Second test, is this address type already registered in the Alto address type register? Answer is yes. So the new domain name here, must be the same as the one already registered in the Alto address type registry. Second example, you want to register a domain name called cell. Okay, we know that this does match a known address type, a known address format, such as, for example, ECGI. Okay. But it is not specified yet in the Alto address type registry. So you create a new domain ID called, for example, cell, and then once it is created, you use it. First thing, you register it in the Alto address type registry to make sure that there is nobody will afterwards create a new Alto address type registry with another name and pointing to the same thing. Once you have done it in the Alto address type registry, then you go ahead and register it as an entity domain. Third example, you want to have you register an entity domain PID. So this for sure does not match any known address formats. And neither, of course, is it registered in the Alto address type registry. So there you go ahead, you define a new entity domain and identifier, and you register this entity domain with the IANA with that name. So now other updates. So there is in section 5.6.
5 minutes. If you want to
Okay,
hand over.
okay. So well, we did we updated the error handling process on the responses to property map requests. We also clarified the terminology. And so we updated the examples for more clarity as well. And so this is the remaining issue, but I will give the floor to Richard or Jensen. The next steps, we want to have a working group discussion on these issues and submit next version 05 as soon as possible. So.
Yes. How many time do I have?
4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have already have the progress to resolve the remaining issue on the previous meeting, but when we revised the document, we found there are some technical issues, two technical issues we need to fix, and we need to fix it before we proceed into the last call. So first one, we think there is the issue about when the client requests send a request for address block to the filtered property map, how the client can get the correct property value from the server. And the second issue is about how the client can interpret the dependency resource from the auto server information directory, and when the property map have the multiple dependency between the resources. So I will give an example about how about the how to move
get to the slide, and I can. So is that the slide you want?
Yeah,
issue one.
Issue one. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So the first issue about we'll take an example. For example, if the server have the full property map, like our left side, they have the three entities, and now the client wants to request a property for the entity, for example, 2.0/27, and from the current protocol specification, the server will return only this entity and its properties. So the property will be inherited from the PID 0, and when the client gets this response, the client will think every single address in this address block will have the PID property value with the PID 0, but actually it's the result is different from full property map. So, yeah. So we propose we have three rules to make the server can guarantee the client can always get the correct properties from the request. So, for example, if the client requested /27 and first rule, the server will return will include this /27 entity and derive its property should be PID 0 from the inheritance rule, and then the server found the there is a typo. The 2.0/28 and 2.16/28 will be covered by this request address block. So, but they have different property values, so the server need to include them in the response. And then the server will scan all the entities in the response and found actually the /27 is redundant. You can remove it. Yeah, and for the second issue about how to handle how the client can interpret the dependency results from the information results capability and use it spelled without any ambiguity. So we propose a solution like such an precise. The client can
have less than 1 minute.
Okay, yeah, just 1 minute. Yeah. So the process like for every single entities in the entity domain in the client will take the full usage list and scan the list for every maybe the resource specific property and get their dependency results in order. So let's take an example. I think is clear enough. So do you have any question about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to mention actually made a comment on the first one. Can you go back to the first issue?
Issue.
Yeah, issue number 1. And I think issue number 1 actually is more important for us to fix in this document. And the issue this issue was somehow not caught by the working group reviews and was captured when I was talking to a couple of people from Yale. And I have these people doing like programming language designs, and we talk about it kind of like inheritance. So I said, oh, then wouldn't you handle the issue of decomposition? I said, what do you mean? And they said, okay, you have a bigger set, and you're looking for the property. Essentially, this is a common issue in programming language design when you talk about inheritance. So a bigger set and of all objects, and you look at their attributes. And then somehow would be, and you also can partition, you do inheritance, you do refinement, and multi-inheritance, you essentially partition all kind of like smaller subsets and have all kind of properties. If you query the property, like given property P for a larger set, how do you return? Do you return the base property or you return essentially the derived properties? And so that turns out to be a major issue here. I think eventually for us to be correct is we make a decision to really essentially return all the refined properties. And with the understanding that it's really that people want to cache the result and utilize them locally. But I do want the working group people to really consider and share comments, because that's very important. And why? Because to fully solve it, we need the specification is not like a couple of sentences. It needs to be a lot more detailed. For example, you have a bigger set, and derivations would have all kinds of smaller sets, and smaller sets can overlap. If the overlap, now the order is important. Who appears first? Essentially some kind of like open flow specification. You have all the wild cards and different wild cards by different priorities. We essentially need to talk about how they match and so on. So, and it's not like that complex, but essentially we would have a whole complex of open flow matching, match and action rules. So therefore, I think that we want to get approval from the whole working group. If we do, we'll solve that issue.
Okay. So I don't think we are, I think this is a good issue to take to the mailing list. I have some thoughts on, in programming languages, once you have base class and derived classes, and you can use certain casting, etc., to cast a derived class to a base class object, etc. But the basic idea is that you can always go from top to bottom, but you may not be able to go from bottom to top. So I think we need to just work it out on the mailing list and see what makes sense.
So I have a question that is, you have already considered a relationship between the auto entity domain registration, auto entity domain registry and the auto address type registry. And another relationship is the auto endpoint property type registry and the I think it is
IETF properties.
yes,
Yeah.
auto
As
domain, entity property type registry. So in the auto endpoint property type registry, all the property values is assumed to be adjacent string. So its registry states as following: it has an identifier and an identifier of the property name and the intended semantics of this property. It does not have to define what value type, the value type of the property it is. But in this document, you said that it will borrow the, in the best case, it will we change the name of the
I think the
endpoint.
comment, please be brief because we are really out of time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We will just change the name, but you change the value type to the JSON value. So I propose that whether you need to extend the registry, you have to add an additional field like what value it is, because
Yeah,
JSON value is too generic value type.
Yeah, actually, I think we will specify how to register the entity property. I think we cannot just borrow the endpoint property. That's totally very different. For example, in the issue 2, we need to focus. We need to specify which property is resource specific or not, and actually, it's very important.
Okay, I see Dawn not quite convinced, so I'll ask you both to take it to the mailing list. So I do want to focus now on the next 3 slots. The first coming up is remaining issues in Alto from Richard, and then we have an Alto survey that we've put up before we go into the next step for working groups. So our thinking is that the Alto survey can maybe inform us what the next steps for the working group would be. So these 3 slots, starting with Richard and the next 2 thereafter, are essentially to see, what type of, where do we want to go once the current deliverables in Alto are done. So that said, Richard, I will.
Thank you. So I'll talk about remaining issues, and actually will not be only the remaining issues. And I think that's a good time to also think about what we have accomplished so far in terms of Alto structure. And so therefore, it's not only, so therefore, first part of the framework, what exactly we have accomplished, what can we really Alto is doing. And then we'll talk about the remaining issues that are accompanying 2 parts. I think then the survey will also provide something insight, in particular for the first part. And I don't want to claim we don't have a draft, and we only have a red draft. And of course, I'm not a presenter, but this actually came out from discussions with a large number of people, Sabine, and Lyle, Danny, Christian, and Don, a lot of people. So a lot of discussions are also going on, and complete pictures and so on. So let me really start, see what exactly, and we have, thank you, automatic. And so what exactly is the Alto structure so far, and we have been working on. And here is very quick and it's a one-slide overview of all the documents that we're working on. And on the left-hand side is all these kind of like light green, they're all RFCs. I think we have 6 RFCs and to be developed from very beginning of the, for example, from problem statement and requirements, and then you design this protocol. From this protocol, you have service discovery, and then you have deployment, and then you start the extension and multicast. So that's exactly what we have accomplished already. They are already RFCs and so on. And right now in the queue, we have about 7 drafts, working group documents, and they're designing all kinds of incremental extensions for the Alto session. So therefore, there are about 7 documents, and which I'll try to really unify and try to discuss.
Richard, can you speak in the mic?
Oh, speak to the mic. Yes. Okay, great. Good idea. Okay, and then we have is quite a few number of drafts, individual drafts, and they are not working group documents, and people are still maintaining them, updating them, and so on. So let's really see what's going on and how to really refine it. To really talk about that, and first thing I want to do is somehow to understand exactly somehow the structure of the current documents. So already I mentioned a little bit your problem statement, and then your problem statement, you derive requirements. From requirement, you derive base protocol, and then we start to do a larger number of essentially extensions. Of course, here is we first really have the discovery on top we have deployment, and here we have a large number of extensions. But that's still relatively clear on what derivation really looks like in terms of auto thing. But now let's take a look at the framework. So therefore, I give you essentially the document framework, but now let's take a look at essentially what exactly is the conceptual framework we have done. And I think one thing we learned from beginning is why you guys don't develop a young programming model and so on, and some obviously, okay, maybe you should design something generic. So let's see what exactly generic mechanism we have already developed, and then we can talk about remaining issues. So now let's imagine we are someone teaching this Alto in a class, and let's talk about itself. What kind of protocol framework we already introduced as a generic powerful framework? So here are essentially the more generic frameworks we have introduced. We essentially introduced the concept that networking information, because basically the protocol from network to applications is that networking information is divided into information resources. That's a fundamental design decision for this working group, for this essentially the framework. And therefore, if we do the division, we use the concept of media types, because we have modularity, where all different information sources have different media types. That's the way to organize it. And then if you divide into different information resources, we want modularity, reusability. We introduce the issues of dependency and consistency. So therefore, we introduce all these mechanisms to handle dependencies and handle, for example, consistency of different resources. And then we continue to say, oh, okay, multiple resources are dependent. How do I discover what kind of resources I can really access from this network? And then we introduce a concept called the information resource directory. You're the server, you announce all the resources you have, and therefore there's a resource concept. And then what happened is you have the resource information resource directory and how people find information directory. And what we have is we have solved the issue of server discovery. So think about that they are all actually not really dependent with Alto at all. It's in a way as a generic framework. Let's talk about applications, what kind of thing I can provide. Let's have a divide and conquer modularity and so on. And then we continue in terms of this framework. And what we said, okay, now for each information resource, let's provide it as RESTful device service. That's another decision we made. And then we developed a very simple grammar to specify essentially JSON grammar to really specify what kind of information you really provide. So that's the second progress we have made. And then what we'll talk about is, okay, we have resources and directories, and now everyone will be RESTful interface. And now it can be specified grammar, and now we introduce a general concept called filtered. We said, okay, information resources can be filtered. So therefore, that's a very nice concept. And then what we did was we introduced 2 more generic concepts in this framework. And one is a generic SSE-based framework to stream, control, push, increment, update information resources. It's okay for every single individual resource. You can have grammar, you can filter them, and you can say, hey, I want to push, server push, and I want to do the push. I want to have incremental Dart encoding, not full encoding, and I can even control what kind of thing I want to do that. So that's generic protocol. They don't have to apply it for Alto at all. They're just essentially is a framework. And then on top of it, what we did was essentially a generic framework called entity properties, supporting inheritance and decomposition. So everything is entities, properties. We developed this whole generic framework. They do not have to be Alto at all. They are generic protocol framework to provide information in a systematic way. So that's the one. And now if you look at the slides, and here are essentially all the related protocols and related concepts. And if imagine, for example, I think there are several designs already for Alto, for example, in Java class framework. Those are the major frameworks. So now let's take a look at what we have accomplished. Let's continue. Next one we talk about essentially is what exactly abstraction we provided. right? We have generic protocol framework, and now let's look at what exactly is specific for networking and to applications for auto purpose. Here actually is a very set of very simple abstractions we introduced in auto. So what it is, we essential abstraction is very simple. A network consists of set of nodes and paths. That's all we said, essentially. We don't have anything fancier. And this moment, so far, our abstraction is a network consists of set of nodes and set of paths. That's all we said. And what kind of nodes can we have? And the auto protocol says, okay, the nodes can be endpoints, IPv4 address, IPv6 address, and so on. And it can be aggregation of endpoints, partition ID and provide ID. And then you can have abstract network elements. That's all we said. You can have those concepts. No, that's all we have in this abstraction. All the rest complexity, they're gone. Okay? And then what we did was, okay, we can unify all the nodes as entities, and they call entities, and entities can have properties inherited and decomposed. That's all we said. For the passes, we also said something very simple, very simple. For the abstraction, is a path is from one node to another node. And essentially for this path, you have path properties. We introduced the concept called matrix, and matrix can have calendars. And in particular case, right now we're doing is a path can be a vector, and product and vector is a set of abstract network elements. That's all we said. So far with all these protocols, all we said is it's a very simple abstraction. Okay. So if you really want to like essentially the framework, and now it's very simple, and essentially is they are all the nodes and all the paths, some generic concepts. Okay, to support this overall abstraction of network and so on. And now let's take a look at what are the remaining issues. If we could redesign the system again, remember we always have second system issue is you design a system, you come back, oh, damn, I did a bad job. Let me refine it. Let me redo it. I think probably we cannot redo the protocol in terms of what we accomplished, what were constrained. I think we did a pretty good job. But of course, still we have quite a few places where we have remaining issues. Now let's take a look at them. And in particular, let's look at them from a concept of what we have already accomplished. So here is a generic framework, not networking specific. It's a framework. And now let's take a look at what exactly we are really somehow missing. And one thing we're missing this moment is we talk about resource dependency, but somehow dependency is so far specified is relatively rigid. The idea essentially bottom-up, use-based driven. It starts from network maps and cost maps that are dependency. We just, dependency, just we write, for example, dependent uses, concept, and so on. It's not very generic. Is it possible to make these dependencies to be more generic and also make the transport to be more generic? Essentially into some kind of concept of transactions and so on as a generic mechanism. For example, Young model and so on would have such a mechanism, but my personal opinion, it is slightly way too complex than we really wanted. So therefore can we make it generic, but still in our very simple framework of information resources, not in a language context. So that's one remaining issue. And second issue, of course, is we have a grammar. So far working out very well. And of course, the major trend now in IETF is you talk about the Young model, and you specify all the grammars and so on. Of course, we're based on JSON. And so the question is, how long do we really want to formalize our grammar or not? Do we want to have write down, say, oh, here's the grammar, and maybe that'll be very useful for us and also useful for other people. So therefore, that's the second remaining issue people can think about. The second one essentially is we talk about is we have this incremental updates and pushes, which is a very powerful mechanism. Now the question is, can we do more generic, flexible, transportable push incremental update and so on? For example, we're based on SSC. How about, for example, HTTP2? How about other ones? So therefore, if that's a remaining issue, if people need to think about it, we may or may not design so far working out very well. And for example, why this is triggered? That's triggered by the comments from the guy from SSC. He said, okay, if you use another transport, maybe it can be a lot more efficient. Maybe we can even develop that one in the framework of this overall framework. Remember, this is generic framework. And then we talk about is the following. We have a filter concept. We introduce filtering in multiple places, but somehow they are all specific. There's not a generic filtering concept we introduce in Alto framework. And we always specify the filter and we define all this stuff. And for example, there is a generic filtering concept, for example, XPath. But it's incredibly inefficient. I believe that's the way for getting a typical filter, a data tree, for example, a grammar, but that's inefficient. So therefore, question is, remaining issue is, do we want to develop a generic filtering mechanism? Still specific enough, but same time actually be general enough for all contexts. I think that'd be very, very useful and very helpful, can simplify a lot of things and make a lot of things a lot more beautiful. So those are the remaining issues. The second set of remaining issues will be related with essentially our abstractions, right? Generic protocol framework. And in terms of the specific abstractions, let's look at one by one. One, of course, is we talk about all kinds of nodes. Richard, 3 minutes. 2 minutes? Okay, I'm almost done. You do 3 minutes. So, okay. So we talk about, for example, all kinds of entities and so on. And now our entities, of course, be very simple. Would be like a typical domains, IPv4, IPv6, PID, and also, for example, network abstract elements. We probably need to really start looking into other key domains. For example, like for cell phone, for 5G, and for all kinds of domains. And they are all very actually low-hanging fruit because why? We have a whole framework. Introduce them will be very, very simple, clean, and we probably should start to really think about that. And now let's look at all the paths we support. And one thing we're doing this moment is we have all the kind of like a cost map between two aggregations. And endpoint cost map is between two endpoints. And then path vector, essentially the properties is path vector. The question is for the, is we can think about the generic path properties from one node to another node or set of nodes. Essentially, for example, can be flow, multipath. They are now somehow starting to be a little bit like low-hanging fruit, and they can be all very beautifully designed. I think if people are interested, we should really attack them and solve those issues. I think they are the key remaining issues. And now let's take a look at the other essential generic concept. They are somehow called unquote outliers. And one outlier, of course, is the one we talked about already, calendar concept. I think this is very, very powerful concept, very, very generic concept, but unfortunately, the kind of concept is introduced, is also piecemeal. Here we talk about cosmetric calendar. Can we make a calendar concept to be generic, essentially generic annotation in the system design and introduce? I think that would be very beautiful. We're not doing that. And also another concept with filtering, I talk about it, is where filtering this moment is very, very specific. Can we make it generic? Of course, generic in terms of language express, or maybe all generic in terms of abstractions. This still can be designed in a very abstract and very, very clean way. I think there's some like a unified representation, which we're trying to do, like ESNet 6 and so on, trying to look into the path, but probably can be very interesting. One more thing is, like, if you look at this bigger picture, you realize actually FCI map is somehow is an outlier in some sense. Nodes and paths, linking nodes, and here FCI essential nodes with properties, but reverse it. That's called capabilities. I think what we really need to start to really think about that, because it's really motivated by the comments, by these people from 5G, from all China Mobile and so on, is maybe we really should design this one to be a generic network capability. So therefore now suddenly our overall system becomes a very powerful design. So those are the two ones, and extension remain issues in the generic protocol framework and remain issues in terms of abstractions. And of course, probably this is the most important, and is also look at Alto remain issues in the bigger picture. So what are the bigger picture issues? Number one, of course, really fundamentally is it should be use cases and requirements. And no matter how beautiful your framework is, how elegant your abstraction is, and you're all happy and so on, but eventually it's a determination is how good a job you do to make it useful. You could be very ugly protocols to be useful, the other way around may not work. So therefore, I think one major use case and major essential remaining issue is look at the use cases and requirement. For example, I think Lau is really arguing very strongly that we should really look at how Alto information is fit up into use cases. For example, a major use case will be using Alto in orchestrations and to do all kinds of things. For example, integrating our Alto with PCE and PaaS-based services and so on. We look at the use cases, orchestrations. I think now really time. We have all the base protocols, base abstractions. Now let's now really try out on some like real use cases and also deploy. I think that would be very useful. And of course, other settings, for example, multi-domains and functional virtualization, every cloud, IoT, and so on. People propose all kinds of discussions, but we're not really looking at, we're focused on base protocols, but now probably time to look at it. Then you need to not only look at the top, you should also look at infrastructures. I think in early days, we have all kinds of people presenting and so on. Later, we all focus on base protocols. Those people start to really disappear, but they're also very important. Alto essentially is an abstraction. It doesn't see at all where the abstraction comes from, and it just probably that's a vendor secret and so on. But there are a lot of commenting. Of course, a lot of it really will be vendor specific. That's the way you're smart. That's the way you develop a product. That's the way you really make money and so on. But there are a lot of also like a common things which people can do. For example, one example would be essential. For example, proposing. I think there's also a draft now because we're not pushing it because we're focusing on base protocol. Is smart on-demand measurements. We have all the abstractions, but how are they really provided in an efficient, scalable way? For example, is smart on demand, even though it's infrastructure, probably start to really think about that if we really continue to work on here. And of course, also, its proxy architectures really is to really aggregate information from multiple places, provide a more scalable backend, and still expose some kind of common abstraction to the user cases. I think those are all the major remaining issues, which it might be a good time for us to look into. Thanks. Perfect. I'm done. I believe I'm done. Yes.
All right, so lots of information, nice taxonomy of where the drafts are and what the work is in Alto with respect to the large abstractions that we have in Alto. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the survey,
Okay.
and then we have an open discussion slot. So if you have any questions on what Richard presented, we can roll that into the discussion on what to do with the next work, what to do next with the working group.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll be only happy. I think later some drafts we'll talk about some a little bit, but overall it's not as systematic, I guess, as like an outline on the slide.
All right, so let's do the survey, and then we have almost 15-minute open discussion. So Sean, please.
Hello, and this is Sean Lin, and I will present a brief survey of the Alto implementations and use case. So first, I want to describe our goals and scope. Our goal is we want to find out the Alto implementations, the possible issues, and we also want to find out the current use case. Sorry? And future use case on other research opportunities. And for the scope, we have two parts. One part is about Alto implementation, and the second one is about the application scenario of Alto in literature work. So for the first part, it's about the implementation. The methodology of us is the questionnaire. Actually, we designed a questionnaire. It includes three parts. The first one is the basic information, and it includes project name and motivation, system architect, implement map service, and the second one is the 4 entities in Alto implementations, which is data source, Alto server, Alto client, and information consumer. The third one is about the benefits or issues. The next slide is about the methodology of the Alto application scenario in literature work, including papers, projects, patents, and RFCs. Actually, this part, we do a lot of heavy paper reading, and we're trying to classify them. And we use an Alto survey form, which we classified the papers into 3 categories. The first one is the paper who is describing the solution of implementations or deployments of Alto. And the second one is the paper is mentioned Alto as recommended protocol. And this part could be the potential use case for Alto. And the third one is some papers compete with Alto. And this paper is also could be the research opportunities. And for each papers, we will try to dig out is this paper extend standard Altos and how they use Alto or mention Alto, and is there any challenge or research opportunities, or this paper is in a single domain situation or a multi-domain, and also the application scenarios. So next part, I will summarize the current state of our survey. For the implementations, currently we found about 6 implementation. They are from Open Daylight Alto and Alto-based broker assist multi-domain orchestration and Beacons, and also Alto in SDN, a mobile network, and also from Cisco network positioning system, and also a Unicom. And we also know 2 more potential company which already implement Alto. They are Tata and Canada Bell. And here we may need help from working group member to let us get more connection with more companies or institutions so that we can enrich our surveys. And the next part, I will summarize the current state of literature work. First, we trying to classify by the application scenario. The numbers in the bracket is the count of that kind of papers. Actually, there are four application scenarios in the black font. They are relatively common, which is P2P, CDN, SDN, and cloud. And the rest of it in a red font is a relative new application scenario, which include NFV and wireless, blockchain, and IoT, and also the multi-domain. The next part, we also trying to classify the Alto by its functionalities. There are four functionalities currently we summarize. The first one is about the peer selection. It includes peer selection in P2P, surrogate selection in CDN, and DCN selection, and also the cache selection. The second one is about the path selection. It's mentioned by the path selection in multi-path transport layer application relay. And then the third one is about the resource placement. It includes virtualized service function chaining placement and intelligent virtualized machine placements, and also the service placements in IoT. And the last one is about the measurement result interface. Alto can be used as an interface to query on the large-scale measurement results. And for existing use case, we can refer to this link. So the next one is about some future use case. The first one is mentioned by Bell Canada in IETF 101 PN